Cro-Magnon man.
It's great. It makes you look.
That's why you're so smart.
That's right, more room for my brain.
Yeah.
It's the thinking man. Good morning, everybody. This is Tuesday, January 9th, and you're in Senate Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. And I'm Allison Clarkson, the vice chair. Our esteemed chair, Keisha Ram Hinsdale, sadly has COVID and is going to be chairing from home, which, given how she feels, may be a bit of a challenge, but she's present and listening, and I'm sure will join in when she feels she's able. So we're going to begin the week looking at aspects of flood recovery and housing issues as it relates to our downtowns and village centers. We have with us the executive director of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Ted Brady, who we welcome. It's good to have you. And we are going to be, we're going to be addressing, I think, your priorities as they relate to Act 250, as we look at reducing barriers to housing in our downtowns and village centers and in our towns, and also flood recovery and how our work relates to your priorities and some of your work. So I know it's a broad sort of double whammy framework, but we would love to check in with you and partner with you as we go forward this session.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me and caring what I think once again. Nice to see you back in your homeroom instead of upstairs as the last visit. So for the record, Ted Brady from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So I shared a document and I'm not sure if I should share that live. If so, I don't have the link to do so, but it's on the committee page.
Then if you want to see it if it's on the page, Magali can share it.
Would you mind just sharing that document? So I just shared a document that shows the VLCT's legislative priorities for this year. And as you just said, I think they're really anchored in flood recovery and in housing. But the document itself, on page 1, it'll show up eventually. You can scroll down just a tad bit. It's really about two things, and this is revenue and capacity, which are tied directly together. Towns need these two things, and in order to play a role in the recovery. And our vision for municipal government in this modern age is that the municipal government, federal government, and the state government, all three of these branches need to work together in order to respond to climate change, in order to respond to the needs of Vermonters, in order to build housing, right? No big surprise there. But right now, that third leg of that plan is woefully underfunded, and it's woefully under resourced, people-wise, and that's where it comes down to this revenue and capacity. So, when we look at what we did last year in housing here in this building, really focusing on municipal law changes, my opinion is that was really aimed at larger communities that have capacity to do great planning and have capacity to implement some big land use changes that'll have significant changes. And there are a lot of communities, I think, that have that capacity. But when you talk about, half-time zoning administrators or not having a planning and zoning administrator, when you talk about not having a town administrator or a town manager, all those things, that's more than half the towns. More than half the towns really aren't going to be able to exercise the vision that we worked on together last year.
Do you have statistics on that, Ted, of how many towns have partial? I would love to see, and I think it would be helpful for us to see, because the capacity issue is, as we as senators know, representing many towns, is that it's so inequitable in terms of who has what resources to apply for what grants. And the regional planning commissions only have so much capacity themselves to help, because they have traditionally sort of stepped in and helped, as our RDCs have. But it would be helpful, I think, for us to have a picture of maybe even district by district, how many towns have full-time managers, part-time managers, full-time zoning administrators, part-time zoning administrators.
I think we do have that for a lot of towns. I don't know if we have we definitely have it for managers and administrators.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have it for planning and zoning administrators, but I can check, and we have some of it. So yeah, that'd be an easy thing to share.
I mean, just because we passed additional help for bylaw modernization. Well, that, again, that's the kind of thing that people who are on the ball can, or and who have resources and capacity can take advantage of, which is much harder for our smaller towns.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll work on sharing something.
Yeah, no, it would be helpful, I think.
So if we scroll down just a little bit, sorry, Magali, to ask you to help me out. You can see we have these seven sub priorities that kind of relate to this revenue and capacity. And I'm not going to touch on all of them because some of them are not what you're asking me to talk about today. But on the left, you can see the first one is housing. And it's our opinion that there is a magic moment in this building that you folks have, orchestrated, which is you have 4 studies and a little, hopefully, Venn diagram that shows you there's something we all agree on, which is we need to create a little more yes land use planning in Vermont. And our concept is that we think there's a way to get to 5% for the people in that plan, to say, yes, we can allow our downtowns and village centers and historic growth centers exemption from Act 250. I think about my time in the federal government and in my time in a congressional office where I helped get earmarks. And I remember the first earmark that Gus and Polly Nichols convinced me to do from a housing fund that was not housing, and that was for a wastewater system in Black River Overlook down in Ludlow.
Yeah.
And they said, we can't build the housing if we don't have wastewater. And so this is the big one, like the infrastructure. And so it's the infrastructure stupid, right? That's what I keep telling myself and what Katie Buckley keeps telling me. We could change every law and make every regulation change in the world, but unless we create some tools to allow for municipalities to invest in infrastructure, they can't do it. We talked about Westford in this building for 5 years now, I think.
No, it's really very frustrating.
Right, and when Westford, which had 100% grant funding for their wastewater system, votes things down, you can see that it's complicated to build infrastructure. I think, I can't recall where I was hearing it, but you have a financial issue, you have a political issue, you have a capacity issue, and all 3 of those things manifested themselves in a way that was distressing in Westford.
It was. I had not realized that there was 100% grant funding for that project. I would love to know why people voted no. I mean, that's a fear factor too. That's
right. People don't want growth in that community.
Yeah. And what does growth mean for them? And of course, it means revenue. To go back up to your thing, it means revenue for that town, which, if they thought about it, would alleviate the burden on their taxes possibly. And it's like puzzling. Why are you afraid of this?
The other story I heard, it was Ted Barrett or Barnett from JFO.
Barrett.
Barrett.
I think it's Barrett.
He had worked on a study this summer about municipal infrastructure funding, and he used the example of Grafton. Grafton wanted to do a water or wastewater system down there. I'm guessing it's wastewater. And the EPA magic number for Grafton was for a wastewater system, like operating fees, was like $1,400 a resident. And I think Grafton had gotten a couple $1 million from the state to do some wastewater work. And even with all that grant money, it was still going to be $3,500 per resident to operate the wastewater system. So, even when the state gives grant money, it's not enough. It needs to be 100% to make it actually to build the system for a small town like that, or much more than whatever the state was giving. Ted has a good case study there. It's the infrastructure.
So with that,
who is that?
that we need to have Ted come and present that.
Ted Barrett.
Keisha will weigh in, but I think that let's tag that for scheduling.
Thanks for bringing that up.
It's a neat one.
It's Barnett.
It is Barnett?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
it's
Ted,
our
if you're
bad too.
watching.
I couldn't remember.
No, that's really important. There are new technologies that make it less expensive, because there is a point at which do you really spend $5,000 per person to have that?
Yeah.
That's something that we need to make sure that we're using taxpayer funds wisely. But in my other hat, I sit on the institutions committee, and I'm gonna bring that up actually, I've already brought up wastewater, because so many towns had, problems, their systems were damaged, their plants were damaged. So my question is going to be, do we need to reprioritize what's already in the queue? Because as you probably know, the queue goes back 3 or 4 years. So, we need to look at that. And then there's also been funding of, private company facilities, pre-treatment, which might not be the best use of our money if we have a public system that is, damaged and not able to be, taken care of, and without additional funds. This might not be the right time to pay for private companies to do pre-treatment. So that happened this past summer. And so I don't know if that private system support is ongoing, but that's something that we need to look at more before it happens.
Oh, I know there are several towns trying to balance what is the DODs that some of these big employers and big cheese, beer,
Right.
you name it, companies contribute to their municipal wastewater systems, and that's
Oh,
a balancing
definitely.
act.
And I expect that the towns did support it at the time, but that was a time when their own systems weren't in peril.
Mhm.
So we just need to look at if it's right at this time to divert funding to
Well,
private companies.
they all need to be balancing the revenue they get from hosting those companies and those jobs. And,
Right.
the towns are benefiting, well, and
Yeah, it's just something that we need to look at.
yeah, oh,
After
absolutely.
the flood.
On the left again, I just want to keep moving down to community development. We've talked about project-based TIF here for so long. We're still support project-based TIF, and we think it's the right tool, but if this building doesn't, we just need to create something.
It's good to have.
Perfect time. We're just talking about project-based TIF. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what I told the governor. If he wants to freeze the property tax for new housing development, I'm gonna have to freeze all TIFs to get it through.
God.
Hit on the income, on the property tax this year. So,
Well, I was just saying that project-based TIF is something we clearly support, but if this building doesn't support it, we need a tool to help municipalities do infrastructure development.
yeah,
That's the
I think
the
we
goal.
know that.
Yeah, and the mini ones, I mean, these, what we were calling mini TIFs, the community-based
Yeah.
development, I think, anyway, we will, more to follow, as
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah,
So reappraisals.
Yeah, I don't think that's your jurisdiction. If you'd like me to go into it, I can. Yes, yeah.
okay.
No, the reason that's.
As it relates to revenue though, for towns, that
Well,
that's,
also impact on the property tax. I mean, there's
Right.
just so many perfect storm things hitting this year.
yeah,
The reappraisal things here, because there's a big report due back to the legislature this fall, this coming next winter, about changing how we do the reappraisal system in Vermont, the property valuation. And right now,
Right.
that system, that report has no required input from municipalities, it doesn't empower municipalities who share the grant list to actually deliver the report to the legislature. And I don't think it's gonna, I'm nervous that it won't. I shouldn't say I don't think it will, because tax is doing a very good job of engaging municipalities, but it's not required to, and the legislature is not required to listen to municipalities. In the end, it's going to hear from the tax department about what it thinks a solution to our crisis is, to our problems with the property valuation system. And I'm hoping the legislature would consider asking municipalities for their input specifically on how we reimagine the property valuation system.
so that I assume you're going to go and present as a request to finance.
Yeah, well, yeah, if and when a bill gets to us.
Well, it may have to be a committee bill at this point if nobody's introduced it.
Nobody has introduced it. I'm talking to it seems like it originated in House Ways and Means, and so we are trying to convince Representative Kornheiser
Yeah, okay.
that makes.
Good, well, that's good for Anna to have on her radar.
I'll talk to him, see what's going on.
Magali, can I ask you to help me scroll down again? I want to just highlight, because you talked about disaster response, and if you go down to the last page, fund the disaster response and recovery from the summer floods. It's the second to last bullet.
There it is.
You've heard me talk about this, and you folks have introduced bills that get to this, but I still believe, I want to reiterate the 5 keys, I think, to disaster response and recovery. Flooding, providing tax abatement for flood relief, that includes the municipal and the ed fund. Providing impacted municipalities with the local match required for FEMA public assistance projects, awarding revenue loss funding to municipalities to fill the gaps where they've lost revenue, continue funding the flood resilient communities fund, which helps do mitigation projects that FEMA might not pay for, and supporting better emergency preparedness coordination at the state and local level. Those things largely, I've seen pieces of that in several pieces of legislation this summer, just this winter. So I just want to flag those for you.
I think the problem is the money. And we don't have a lot this year. And we have a governor who will oppose any raising of revenue. So it's,
We have our own perfect storm.
yes.
But we luckily have a fund that we can rename and and add to. So we have actually happily a vehicle in that slightly misnamed, I think what will become the future disaster relief fund or whatever. BGAP, also there needs to be, I think, for towns, for revenue, also a continued look at how we help support businesses that recover, because at the moment, as you know, FEMA, and there's less support for businesses recovering.
Yes.
And then Allison, may
Yeah.
I don't know if I sent it to you, but I have a stormwater utilities bill that is intended to help municipalities have that way of raising funds.
Yep.
For stormwater. So I think that would be an improvement, and hopefully it would be
I
something
think
that we
I
would support.
committed to you to reaching out to a few of our stormwater managers and better understanding the impact. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, so let me know if you have
And it
any
doesn't
concerns so
include
far.
Farms.
Right, it does not include farms.
Decided that.
Decided that last
year.
Right.
But St. Albans doesn't have to pay back what they collected. It was a compromise.
Did you want to talk about any more about Act 250? I just wanted to be clear that we see what's happening here, and
And you've seen the report, NRB's report,
Yep.
which I assume you support pieces of that substantially.
absolutely, and in large part, we support the concept of what the report suggests. I think our only concern is it's going to take years to implement the recommendations from these reports, and there's going to be a time, the best I'm reading it, a couple to 3 or 4 years where before this stuff gets implemented, before we have a statewide land use map, before we have a new designation program, before we have these areas that are tiered, 1, 2, and 3, and whatever they are, you need to do something to allow for some growth. And it seems like defaulting back to let's allow Act 250 exemption in our designated centers in the interim. Let's extend any deadlines we put out there that said we're going to do this, Act 250 exemption for 2 or 3 years. Let's extend those until the grand plan is actually in place.
I think we're seeing some of this in our education fund, the projected increase. We've got the highest cost per student in the country, and we are not doing a luxury education. We just have too few kids in the seats, and the number of kids is declining, and the number of this, of Social Security age is increasing, and in 5 more years, there might be 5% more of us. And yeah, something bad is going to happen. We don't have the nurses, we don't have the teachers, and I'm hoping this perfect storm will make us come to grips with some of the hard decisions we have to make, and that includes where are we going to put housing, and not 3 years from now, but now.
Agreed, and I think we also have to look, because with most of our village centers, where a lot of this would be appropriate, the village centers are too small.
Yes.
The designated piece is too small, so it would be great for us also to consider a a band around the village centers. Woodstock's a great example. I mean, the building in our downtown would be perfect. The problem is, if you exempt the village center, the designated village center, it is really literally only the commercial center, which there is some housing in the second, third, and fourth floors, but it doesn't help us in the available land that would be just like even if you just did an eighth of a mile or a quarter of a mile around that village center, that would be helpful.
Well, village centers were not set up to say this is where you put housing. They were set up to help protect your municipal center, which is usually your library, your city hall, and your church, or two.
And the courthouse.
And
So,
well, only
yeah.
if you're.
Yeah, if you're a shire town, as we
Yes.
are. So I think that coupled with the exemption and the extension of the exemption would work immediately. And it's something that we can explore.
But in general, we support the compromise that the Act 250 report suggests. What the RPCs did great work on their,
Yeah.
on that mapping plan.
And the A&R has done a great job on finishing the river corridors
We
mapping.
can only convince the Natural Resources Committee.
Yes.
But I think we're gonna make progress.
I'm going to have a housing crisis just in my committee because I have half the natural resources. I have no jurisdiction over it, but I want to have them hear
That's funny.
it. So
That's right, you do. You have a considerable
I
percent
have
of the.
half of here and half of natural resources.
Yeah. Well, with a few, anything else, Ted, because we will obviously have you back, but
No, I
this
just
is
want,
a good
I
start.
want to share, these are, I didn't go through all of our priorities. I tried to highlight the ones that touch on your committee's jurisdiction.
Yeah, this is great.
That's all I have.
That's terrific. And Katie Buckley is a resource for us as we work on some of the infrastructure issues.
Yes, and it's a good reminder going back to how we started the conversation about capacity and revenue.
Yeah, increased
And we're
capacity.
gonna have to deal with the infrastructure if we're gonna increase housing. I mean, that's what half of Montpelier's tip was. It's running water and sewer out to Sabin's pasture. You used to get developers to do that, but for them to do that now, your house costs $500,000 to cover the cost. So we're gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, the bell is gonna, if you, anything else, the bell is gonna begin to bing. And there it goes, as
You were
if
good.
Amazing
Bloomer
how-
and I are like, you know? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good start.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate, and
Hope you
Thanks
feel
for being
better.
here.
yeah, Keisha, keep healing, and more to
Thank you.
follow.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ted.
everybody.